Famous celebrities whose graves were exhumed. What if I told you that some of history's most famous figures couldn't rest in peace? That years, even decades after their deaths, their graves were disturbed, their coffins opened, and their remains examined under harsh lights by strangers in white coats. Tonight, we're counting down 13 of the most shocking celebrity exhumations in history. These aren't just macabre curiosities. These are stories of family feuds that lasted beyond the grave, murder mysteries that refused to stay buried, and secrets so explosive they demanded to be dug up. From emperors to presidents, from the king of rock and roll to America's sweetheart, from comedy legends to silver screen icons, these famous figures thought they had found eternal rest. But death, as you'll see, was just the beginning of their stories. What drove families to disturb their loved ones' final resting places? What dark truths were hiding 6 feet under? What desperate criminals would steal a beloved entertainer's body for ransom? And what did they find when they finally cracked open those coffins that had been sealed for decades? By the end of this countdown, you'll understand that sometimes the most shocking revelations come not from the living, but from the dead. These are the famous celebrities whose graves were exhumed and the disturbing reasons why their eternal sleep was interrupted. Number 13, Graham Parsons, the bizarre body theft that wasn't an exhumation. We start our countdown with a story so strange it sounds like Hollywood fiction. Graham Parsons, the pioneering country rock musician, died in 1973 at just 26 years old from a drug overdose in Joshua Tree National Park. But what happened next turned his death into one of music history's most bizarre tales. Parsons had made a drunken pact with his road manager, Phil Kaufman, that whoever died first would have their body taken to Joshua Tree and burned in a spiritual ceremony. When Parsons died, his stepfather planned to ship the body to New Orleans for burial, but Kaufman had other ideas. In an act of twisted loyalty, Kaufman and a friend rented a hearse, convinced airport staff they were from the funeral home, and simply drove off with Parsons' coffin. They took the body to Joshua Tree, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire in the desert. The flames were so intense they singed their own eyebrows and nearly caused a massive wildfire. Police tracked them down within hours, but here's the strangest part. They were only fined $750 each for stealing a coffin. Apparently, there was no law in California specifically prohibiting theft of a dead body. The remaining bits of Parsons' body were eventually shipped to New Orleans and buried, but most of him had already gone up in smoke. While not technically an exhumation, it shows how some people will go to extraordinary lengths to honor the dead according to their own twisted interpretation. Number 12. Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who was moved twice and tested for poison. Napoleon Bonaparte died in exile on St. Helena in 1821, but rumors persisted for over 150 years that he had been poisoned by the British. These whispers grew louder over the decades, fed by the mysterious circumstances of his final illness and the political motivations of those who held him captive. In 1840, Napoleon's body was moved from St. Helena to Paris for reburial at Les Invalides. When they opened his coffin after 19 years, witnesses were amazed to find his body remarkably well preserved. Some attributed this to the climate, others to possible arsenic poisoning, which can act as a preservative. In the 1960s, a Swedish dentist became obsessed with the poisoning theory. In 1961, he obtained samples of Napoleon's hair and tested them using atomic absorption spectroscopy. The results showed arsenic levels up to 100 times higher than normal. This discovery sent shockwaves through the historical community. Had the British slowly murdered Europe's most dangerous man? The arsenic theory gained such credence that serious discussions were held about exhuming Napoleon's body for a full forensic examination. However, recent research has complicated the poisoning theory. Scientists point out that arsenic was common in wallpaper, medicines, and everyday items in the 19th century. Napoleon's hair could have been contaminated after death, or he could have been exposed through his environment rather than deliberate poisoning. Whether Napoleon was murdered or died naturally, his story shows how legends grow larger in death than they ever were in life. Number 11. Abraham Lincoln, the president whose body couldn't find peace. Abraham Lincoln saved the Union and freed the slaves, but couldn't find peace in death. In what might be the most extensive case of post-mortem disturbance in American history, Lincoln's body was moved, reburied, and threatened with theft multiple times over 4 decades. The troubles began in 1876 when counterfeiters led by Big Jim Kennedy attempted to steal Lincoln's body for ransom. They broke into his tomb and began removing his coffin before being scared off by Secret Service agents. This near theft shocked the nation and prompted a series of secret moves to protect Lincoln's remains. Following the attempted theft, Lincoln's custodians quietly moved his coffin to an unmarked basement grave, where it remained hidden for 2 years. Visitors were unknowingly paying respects to an empty sarcophagus. The body was moved again in 1878, 1886, and 1895, each relocation conducted in utmost secrecy. The most significant disturbance came in 1901, when Lincoln's body was exhumed for the final time as part of a major tomb reconstruction. 23 witnesses, including his son Robert Todd Lincoln, were present when they opened the coffin. They found the president remarkably well preserved. His face was still recognizable, his beard intact. After this final viewing, Lincoln's coffin was encased in a steel cage and lowered into a concrete vault 10 feet underground. No one has disturbed Lincoln's grave since, making it one of the few happy endings on our list. Number 10. Charlie Chaplin, the Little Tramp's body held for ransom. Charlie Chaplin was more than just a movie star. He was a global icon whose Little Tramp character brought laughter to millions. But when the legendary comedian died on Christmas Day 1977, his story took a macabre turn that shocked the world. On March 1st, 1978, just 2 months after the funeral, grave robbers struck in the dead of night. They dug up Chaplin's coffin and stole his body from the Swiss cemetery where he'd been laid to rest. But this wasn't random vandalism, it was extortion. The thieves contacted Chaplin's widow, Una, demanding 600,000 Swiss francs for her husband's remains. If she didn't pay, they threatened to destroy the body of one of the world's most beloved entertainers. Una's response revealed incredible strength and dignity. Charlie would have found this ridiculous, she told the press. I will not pay ransom for my husband's body. She refused to reward criminals for violating her husband's grave and exploiting her family's grief. For 11 agonizing weeks, Swiss police conducted one of the most intensive investigations in the country's history. The breakthrough came when they traced phone calls to 2 men, Roman Wardas, an unemployed mechanic, and Gancho Ganev, a Bulgarian immigrant. Under interrogation, the men revealed where they had hidden Chaplin's body, buried in a cornfield 15 miles from his original grave. When authorities found the coffin, Chaplin's body was intact, though the casket was damaged. Chaplin was reburied with extraordinary security measures. His grave was reinforced with concrete and steel, making future theft virtually impossible. The men were sentenced to prison, but their pathetic crime had traumatized a grieving family and outraged the world. Number 9. Zachary Taylor, the president who was poisoned, or wasn't. In 1991, more than 140 years after his death, President Zachary Taylor's body was exhumed from his Kentucky tomb due to persistent rumors that he'd been murdered by arsenic poisoning. Taylor died suddenly in 1850, just 16 months into his presidency, after attending 4th of July festivities on a brutally hot day. He consumed large quantities of ice water and cold milk, then developed severe stomach cramps and died 5 days later. The official cause was acute gastroenteritis, but conspiracy theories flourished. Taylor's anti-slavery stance had made him powerful enemies among pro-slavery politicians. What if he hadn't died of natural causes? What if someone had deliberately poisoned the president to prevent him from stopping slavery's expansion? The exhumation was a major media event. When they opened the coffin, they found Taylor's body remarkably well preserved. His hair was still intact, and his skeletal remains were complete. Tissue samples were subjected to the most advanced toxicological testing available. The results were definitive. No trace of arsenic or any other poison was found. The levels of heavy metals in his body were completely consistent with environmental exposure in the 19th century. Zachary Taylor had indeed died of natural causes, just as doctors originally determined. The conspiracy theory that had persisted for nearly 150 years was finally put to rest. Sometimes disturbing the dead is the only way to let them truly rest in peace. Number 8. Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassin they had to prove was really dead. One of the most bizarre theories surrounding JFK's assassination was that Lee Harvey Oswald hadn't died at all, that the man killed by Jack Ruby was a Soviet imposter, and the real Oswald was living in the USSR. In 1981, nearly 18 years after Oswald's death, his body was exhumed from Rose Hill Cemetery in Fort Worth, Texas. The exhumation was requested by British author Michael Eddowes, who had written a book claiming the real Oswald had been replaced by a Soviet agent. The exhumation became a media circus. Conspiracy theorists gathered outside the cemetery gates, while television crews from around the world documented the proceedings. The atmosphere was tense and almost carnival-like. When they opened the coffin, they found a body in advanced decomposition. 18 years of Texas heat had taken their toll, but enough remained for forensic examination. The team measured every bone, analyzed dental work, and compared skull structure with photographs. The verdict was conclusive. The body was indeed Lee Harvey Oswald. The dental records matched perfectly, and skeletal measurements corresponded exactly with military records. The Soviet imposter theory was definitively disproven. The exhumation also revealed disturbing details about the grave's condition. The coffin had been badly damaged by water infiltration, and the cemetery's drainage had failed. The man who changed American history had been slowly decomposing in a waterlogged grave. Number 7. Salvador Dali, the surreal paternity test from beyond the grave. In 2017, Salvador Dali's body was exhumed in one of the most unusual paternity cases in history. Pilar Abel, a Spanish psychic, claimed to be the illegitimate daughter of the surrealist master, seeking a share of his €300 million estate. Abel alleged her mother had worked as a maid where Dali lived and had confessed on her deathbed that the artist was Pilar's father. After years of legal battles, a judge finally ordered Dali's exhumation from his tomb at the Theater Museum Dali. DNA tests. When they opened Dali's coffin, they discovered something that delighted forensic experts. The artist's famous upturned mustache was still perfectly intact and waxed. Even 28 years after his death, it was as if the flamboyant showman was still posing for one last photograph. DNA samples were taken from Dali's teeth, bones, and fingernails, then compared with Abel's genetic material. The process took months while the art world speculated about the potential results. The answer came in September 2017. The DNA tests proved definitively that Salvador Dali was not Pilar Abel's father. The woman who had spent years believing she was the daughter of a master artist discovered she was the victim of a family myth. Abel was ordered to pay the costs of the exhumation, hundreds of thousands of euros. The case had disrupted the eternal rest of a master artist, all to disprove a claim that had no basis in reality. Number 6. Jesse James, the outlaw who was buried twice. Jesse James, the legendary outlaw, supposedly died in 1882 when shot by Robert Ford. But rumors persisted for over a century that Jesse had faked his death and escaped to live under an assumed name. These theories gained traction when a man named J. Frank Dalton claimed on his deathbed in 1951 that he was the real Jesse James. In 1995, researchers decided to settle the question by exhuming James's supposed grave in Missouri. When they opened the grave, they found badly deteriorated remains. Grave robbers had apparently taken souvenirs over the years, but enough material remained for DNA testing, which was compared with samples from James's living descendants. The results were conclusive. The DNA matched perfectly with Jesse James's known relatives. The famous outlaw had not faked his death, had not escaped and was not J. Frank Dalton. He had died exactly as history recorded, shot by Robert Ford in 1882. James's remains were reburied in a more secure location to prevent future disturbances. The original headstone, chipped away by souvenir hunters over decades, was replaced. The man who robbed banks and trains finally found peace after being buried twice. Number 5. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the composer who vanished. Mozart died in Vienna in 1791 at age 35 and was buried in an unmarked mass grave at St. Mark's Cemetery, according to the customs of the time. For over 200 years, the exact location of his remains was completely unknown. In 1991, scientists decided to test a skull claimed to be Mozart's, which had allegedly been retrieved from his grave in 1801. The skull had passed through several hands before ending up with the International Foundation Mozarteum in Salzburg. When scientists attempted to extract DNA from the 200-year-old skull, they hit the limitations of 1990s technology. The bone was too degraded to yield reliable genetic material. The DNA that remained was fragmented and contaminated, making identification impossible. In 2006, researchers tried again using more advanced technology, this time testing teeth claimed to be Mozart's. Once again, the results were frustrating. Not enough genetic material remained for definitive comparison. The Mozart case highlights the challenges of forensic archaeology with very old remains. Unlike more recent cases where DNA provides clear answers, 18th century remains often present insurmountable obstacles to genetic analysis. Perhaps there's something fitting about Mozart's remains being lost to history. Like his music, which transcends the physical world, Mozart himself has become more legend than man, more inspiration than mortal remains. Number 4. Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the federal government. Mary Surratt was hanged in 1865 for her alleged role in Lincoln's assassination, the first woman executed by the federal government. But questions about her guilt persisted for decades, leading to attempts to exhume her body for vindication. Surratt operated a boarding house where John Wilkes Booth and conspirators met. The evidence against her was largely circumstantial. She knew the conspirators, they met at her establishment, and her son was involved in the plot. The military tribunal that tried her was swift, and many argued unfair. Even some commission members had doubts. 5 of 9 officers signed a petition recommending commutation because of her sex and age. President Johnson claimed he never saw this petition. In the 1890s, her daughter Anna petitioned for exhumation, hoping new forensic techniques might reveal overlooked evidence. However, when investigators located Surratt's grave, they found it had been disturbed sometime over the years. The remains were no longer intact. Whether this disturbance resulted from natural decay, flood damage, or deliberate tampering remains unknown. Despite the compromised grave, Anna continued efforts to vindicate her mother, keeping questions about Mary Surratt's innocence alive in public discourse. Modern historians reviewing the evidence generally agree that while Surratt may have known about some plot, the extent of her involvement remains unclear. Her case serves as a cautionary tale about rushing to judgment in times of national crisis. Number 3. Elvis Presley, the king they had to prove was really dead. No celebrity death has generated more conspiracy theories than Elvis Presley's. When the king died in 1977 at Graceland, conspiracy theorists immediately claimed he had faked his death to escape fame's pressures. Believers pointed to supposed inconsistencies, the misspelling of his middle name on the tombstone, the unusually heavy coffin, and numerous alleged sightings worldwide. The Elvis is alive theory became a cultural phenomenon by the 1980s. While Elvis's body has never been officially exhumed, despite numerous petitions, the closest attempt came in the 1990s when forensic experts offered to use ground-penetrating radar to confirm a body's presence without disturbing the grave. The Presley estate declined, stating the family wanted Elvis to rest in peace. Some saw this as evidence of a cover-up, while others respected their desire for privacy and grief. Medical experts who reviewed Elvis's case consistently concluded his death was entirely consistent with his health problems. His heart was severely damaged by prescription drug abuse, explaining the cardiac event that killed him. The persistence of Elvis conspiracy theories reflects our complex relationship with celebrity mortality. The idea that he might have escaped to live normally became a comforting fantasy for fans who couldn't accept his death. Number 2. John F. Kennedy, the president whose autopsy never ended. While JFK's body has never been exhumed, the handling of his autopsy has generated more controversy than perhaps any other case in history. The initial autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital was performed under extraordinary circumstances by doctors who weren't forensic pathologists. They worked under pressure from officials wanting quick completion, leading to critical errors in documentation and procedure. Most controversially, Kennedy's brain was removed for separate study, but later went missing from the National Archives. To this day, no one knows what happened to the president's brain, a central element in conspiracy theories. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, researchers called for Kennedy's exhumation, arguing that advances in technology could provide definitive answers about the number of shooters and bullet directions. However, the Kennedy family has adamantly opposed any disturbance of the president's grave. They argue he has sacrificed enough for his country and deserves peace. The government has also resisted, citing practical and ethical concerns. Whether Kennedy's body will ever be exhumed remains unlikely. The passage of time has made examination less scientifically valuable, while family opposition remains absolute. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe, the bombshell who became a murder mystery. At number 1 is perhaps the most shocking exhumation story, one that never happened but came terrifyingly close. Marilyn Monroe died in 1962 under circumstances that have generated endless conspiracy theories. The official story was barbiturate death, ruled as probable self-harm. But questions arose immediately about what really happened that night in her Brentwood home. Her connections to the Kennedy brothers fueled theories that she'd been murdered to prevent revelations about their affairs. The most serious challenge came in 1982 when the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors reopened the investigation. During this probe, there were serious discussions about exhuming Monroe's body for modern autopsy. Advances in forensic science since 1962 meant new examination might reveal missed evidence. The possibility sent shockwaves through Hollywood and Monroe's fan base. The idea of disturbing America's most beloved icon was deeply controversial. However, investigators ultimately decided against exhumation. After reviewing all evidence, they found no credible support for murder theories. The decision not to disturb her grave only fueled more speculation about what authorities might be hiding. The Monroe case has become the prototype for celebrity death conspiracies containing all elements that fuel such speculation: beauty, vulnerability, powerful connections, and enough ambiguities to allow alternative theories. The fact that Monroe's body remains undisturbed allows conspiracy theories to flourish unchecked. As long as the mystery remains, the bombshell who defined Hollywood glamour can live forever in imagination. These stories reveal something troubling about our relationship with fame and mortality. When ordinary people die, they rest undisturbed, but celebrities belong to the public even after death, their bodies becoming evidence in conspiracies, objects of curiosity, or targets for exploitation. Each exhumation was driven by different motives, but all shared a common thread: the belief that fame creates public ownership extending beyond the grave. Families faced impossible choices: protect dignity or seek answers, often paying enormous emotional costs regardless. The lessons learned. These cases teach us important lessons. Science can solve historical mysteries, as proven with Taylor, Oswald, and James, but some mysteries resist solution due to time and decay. Conspiracy theories prove remarkably persistent, surviving even contradictory evidence. Most importantly, death doesn't end public interest. It intensifies it. Behind each sensational story were real people suffering real grief. The families who chose exhumation hoped to settle rumors. Those who refused protected dignity and their right to grieve privately. Looking forward, as forensic science advances, pressure to exhume famous remains will likely increase, but technology alone shouldn't drive these decisions. The most successful exhumations had clear, answerable questions. The least successful were fishing expeditions hoping for unspecified revelations. Future families can learn from these experiences. Scientific consultation can determine if useful information is recoverable. Legal counsel can protect against frivolous claims, and the deceased's own wishes should be given weight. From emperors to entertainers, these celebrities remind us that fame offers no protection from exploitation, even in death. Whether driven by conspiracy theories, scientific curiosity, or criminal greed, disturbing eternal rest is never taken lightly, with consequences rippling far beyond the grave. These stories show science's power to answer questions, but also its limits. They reveal celebrities' vulnerability after death and our responsibility to protect the deceased's dignity. Most importantly, they remind us that behind every exhumation is a grieving family deserving compassion, not criticism, for their impossible choices. What shocked you most? Should celebrities rest in peace like everyone else? Or does fame create different obligations after death? Let us know in the comments below. If you found these stories fascinating, please like this video and subscribe for more incredible tales from the intersection of fame, mystery, and mortality. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most incredible stories happen after the final curtain falls.